Good evening. Let me start with a little bit of background. That little girl with the Dutch boy haircut is me. Pictured here in 1964 with my father and his brand new tractor. So we were equally important there. I grew up on a small farm in southern Idaho. And agriculture is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. But I didn't grow up to become a farmer. Instead, I became an English professor who is interested in the story of the American farm. This isn't a TED Talk about raising backyard chickens or starting an urban farm. There's plenty of talks out there for that. Instead, I'm here tonight to talk about farming in media and in public discourse. I want to point you to some of the rich and varied and sometimes contradictory ways that we see farming in our culture and what that says about our values at any given moment. For instance, by the time this photo was taken, the U.S. Department of Agriculture had spent almost a decade telling small farmers like my father to get big or get out. At the time, the iconic image of the small independent farmer was something like this. Country bumpkins in a cornfield, none too smart and definitely none too sexy. But today, even though farmers comprise less than 1% of our population, the farmer is enjoying a kind of cultural renaissance in the American imagination. Farming is the new sexy. We see this with the Peterson brothers, 3 handsome and wholesome farm boys from Kansas who have a series of farm videos on YouTube that have been seen more than 28 million times. Check out this clip from their famous parody of the song, "I'm Sexy and I Know It."
Gotta feed everybody. Gotta feed everybody. Gotta feed everybody.
I work out.
When I step to the bar,
Yeah.
this is what I see. All the hungry cattle are staring at me. I got passion for my plants and I ain't afraid to show it. Show it, show it, show it.
I'm farming and I grow it.
The Petersons are just one example of how today's farming is hip again. And farmers are considered to be toned, tanned, and ready for their calendar shoot. And when this is the cultural image of farming, what naturally follows is a change in how we engage with agriculture. Today, eating locally is in vogue, so much so that in 2007, the Oxford Dictionary called locavore Word of the Year. Since then, farmers' markets have more than doubled in number in our country. And the USDA's new mantra is know your food, know your farmer. 2007 was also the year that the Salt Lake City Farmers Market began using this image as the face of their quintessential American farmer. The painting, entitled Bumper Crop by Utah artist Greg Newbold, represents the farmer as perfect in physical form, manly power, and potency. And if he looks vaguely familiar, Newbold does admit that he may have been influenced by another iconic image. While Michelangelo set out to portray the David as the epitome of youthful male perfection, the statue isn't just about sex appeal. With the sling resting on his shoulders, the David is poised to take action in the fight that will define his life. And likewise, good looks are only part of the message in Newbold's painting as well, where similar facial features, musculature, the classic Renaissance pose, the scale and proportions all suggest a farmer with resolve, set to slay the Goliath of the industrial farm system and restore us to a more authentic relationship with land and food. So the question is, where do these ideas come from? And they date back to Thomas Jefferson and the Founding Fathers. Thomas Jefferson was known to have said that those who cultivate the earth are the chosen people of God. He went on to say they are the most independent, the most vigorous, the most virtuous, the most valuable citizens. Now, is this hyperbole? Well, maybe. But you have to remember that what Jefferson was interested in at that period was populating the new nation with the most worthy citizens. He believed in a kind of farmer-citizen ideal. That is, a better farmer because he was a citizen, and a better citizen because he was a farmer. Jefferson's belief in the act of farming as an act of national commitment is a notion that we have consistently returned to during times of war. You may already be familiar with the Victory Garden campaigns of both world wars that urged the people on the home front to plant patriotically and sow the seeds of victory. During the Second World War, nearly 40% of the produce eaten in the United States during that period actually came from victory gardens. And they sprang up in posh neighborhoods in New York City, on the grounds of Golden Gate State Park, and in the lawns of the White House. But farming as patriotism is not some quaint, outdated point of view. Take, for instance, efforts to link agriculture with national symbols that we see in the FarmAid organization, which of course was established by Willie Nelson in the 1980s. Nowhere is that idea more important and more evident than in the organization's 2001 concert, which was filmed just 18 days after 9/11. The concert producers that year had an ethical dilemma. How could they raise money for family farms, which were by then a population sector so small that the Census Bureau had actually called them statistically insignificant? If they were to be successful that year, they couldn't seem callous or dismissive of the events in New York City that had a nation busy writing checks to Red Cross and various survivor funds. So what did they do? They went back to the rhetoric of Jefferson. And here, for instance, you can see singer and spokesperson Neil Young, and you'll notice what he's wearing. He's wearing a cap from the New York City Fire Department. In between sets, Young cited the 12 farmers' markets that had been destroyed in the terrorist attacks. He blamed our national tragedy on the decline of the family farm. And he advocated a return to rural values as the nation's only hope. The organization had successfully associated farm security with national security. So to recap, farmers represent a host of admirable qualities central to middle-class American values: virtue, integrity, resourcefulness. The American farmer is heroic. He's blessed. He's patriotic. He is ironically sexy and innocent in equal measure. And by the way, you will probably also notice that he is almost always a he, even though women farmers in our time are one of the fastest growing sectors in agriculture. All well and good, right? But if I'm not urging you to be modern homesteaders, why should you care? From my perspective, as someone who studies the rhetoric and the rhetorical choices that writers make every day, I do believe that using the farmer as a primary symbol of the honorable life has significant consequences. Throughout our daily lives, farm-related images are used to move us, persuade us, even manipulate us. Here's an example that you may well remember. The 2013 Superbowl ad for Ram Truck that was narrated by the late Paul Harvey. And I am going to show a little clip of this. And as you're watching, I want you to pay attention to the kinds of emotions that this clip evokes.
So God made a farmer. It had to be somebody who'd plow deep and straight and not cut corners. Somebody to seed, weed, feed, breed, and rake and disc and plow and plant and tie the fleece and strain the milk. Somebody who'd bale a family together with the soft, strong bonds of sharing, who would laugh and then sigh and then reply with smiling eyes when his son says that he wants to spend his life doing what Dad does. So God made a farmer.
So let me ask you, did you hold your breath as Harvey rattled off that endless list of responsibilities of a farmer? Did you feel a lump in your throat as you saw the heads bowed in prayer or that boy with his hat over his heart? And more importantly, did you forget for a microsecond that this was a commercial that was trying to sell you something? We have been culturally trained to have that kind of visceral response, and it works. The Ram truck itself only appeared for 15 seconds total in this entire 2-minute commercial. But it was sufficient to associate the brand with Jeffersonian ideals. If you want to be known as hardworking, civic-minded, God-fearing, optimistic, neighborly, kind, forthright, well, this was your vehicle. And for you cynics out there who think that the message was too heavy-handed to be effective, in February of that year, Ram Truck had the best sales it had had since the 2008 auto crisis began. With its feel-good message aimed, as this last frame says, to the farmer in all of us, the ad had lasting effects in rebuilding our trust in Detroit's auto industry. In advertising, images of farming have become a kind of shorthand for wholesome goodness. Dozens of products use the red barn, for instance, to inspire trust in us, even though what may be inside the red barn may be animals contained in overcrowded situations and pumped full of antibiotics and growth hormones. But tapping into this message doesn't always work, the message of wholesome goodness. Take, for instance, the Monsanto Company, which has battled a public relations problem for decades. The company has been called the face of corporate evil, and it has been the target of hundreds of internet memes like this one because of its history of manufacturing such things as DDT, Agent Orange, PCP, Terminator seeds, Roundup Ready plants, and the genetically modified organisms that have a nervous public calling them frankenfoods. In 2013, the Monsanto Company started a campaign to repair their image. And one of the first things that they did was run this ad in the Wall Street Journal. And you'll recognize by now its familiar themes. Then, inspired by the Ram truck success at the Superbowl of 2013, they ran an ad, a series of ads actually, in the Super Bowl of 2014. The problem is they were pretty forgettable ads. Their attempt to associate themselves with innocent patriotism, the sanctity of a family farm, and even the mother's love, which was the role of this one, has still been no match for what we see in the popular press and social media. The truth is, Monsanto has a long way to go to gain public trust. Perhaps the American public wasn't as naive as it was back in 1947, when this image ran as part of a full-page ad that claimed DDT was a benefactor of all humanity. In fact, DDT was aggressively marketed throughout the 40s and was often said to be safe as mother's milk. That same year, the Trim's Wallpaper Company went so far as to develop a DDT-impregnated wallpaper for children's nurseries. This ad comes from the June 1947 issue of, all places, Women's Day magazine. The wallpaper, we were assured, would protect as well as beautify a child's room, a message of innocence reinforced by the two designs. One featuring Bambi and Mickey Mouse and all the others in the Disney design. And then the second design that was called the Jack and Jill design, which featured an overalled farmer Jack and hhis friend, Farmer girl Jill surrounded by their flock of geese. Pretty unnerving, huh? As I close, I want to leave you with this one last thought. If you still think that farming doesn't have relevance in your life because you can't remember the last time you wielded a pitchfork, think about this. When was the last time you picked up a dinner fork? Writers Wendell Berry and Barbara Kingsolver have said that eating is an agricultural, political, and environmental act. Whether you realized it or not, at your last meal, you took a stand on CAFOs, GMOs, pesticides, rural sustainability, even political unrest. So I ask you at your next meal to think about this and to think about your fork as a particularly powerful farm tool, one that can affect social change and ensure personal and environmental justice. And after all, what could be more sexy than that? Thank you.